on the internet, it says you're developing direct air capture technology. And so on one side, I would like to dig into what that means. And then I would like to know why it is better than trees, kelp, and algae.
Right. Okay. So I'm happy to tackle those two things. So direct air capture is a family of technologies that captures air, well, carbon dioxide from the air, processes it in some way that you then end up with pure carbon dioxide. And the destination for this carbon dioxide is various. There are a lot of ways that you can then remove that CO2 permanently from the atmosphere. So notable examples of that is storing it in rocks. So there's lots of rocks on the planet that will react with CO2 and form carbonates. It's probably my favorite way of storing it because it's the most secure and the most, durable. And then there's actually a lot of sites around the world where there's abandoned gas fields or expired gas fields that once stored natural gas and now can store CO2. But, people are less confident about, whether that's a safe way of storing CO2 on the, centuries timescale. So that kind of covers removal. There's some other examples, but those are the big ones. The other things that direct air capture is being used for is to provide CO2 in a commodity form, a feedstock for some process for making products. And those products can be fuels, they can be materials, different types of chemicals, and even food. And then there's lots of other things like fire extinguishers and fizzy drinks and all that. But from a climate perspective or a sustainability perspective, they're not as they don't gain quite as much attention.
Yeah. So it's like
so
it's kind of like a filter. So you guys are like building a giant filter, which then can suck out the CO2, and then you can use that material to do other things. So you go from being like a giant AC unit sort of type of thing to like a supply chain. You then supply other people on the market so they can build that stuff.
Yeah. So direct air capture generally always has a few things in common. There's some way of taking a moving stream of air and, as you say, filtering it. That may be filtering it into a solid, capturing it as within some solid material. Those are called solid sorbents. And then there's a lot of liquids that can capture CO2 as well. So in that case, instead of CO2 rushing through this solid filter, it's more like a kind of controlled waterfall where you have liquid being sprayed and drizzled across these high surface area materials that are very porous or have open channels and allows the air to blow past that flowing stream of liquid. And that's the type of technology we're working on. And then there's a variety of ways that you then get that CO2 back out. It could be with heat, it could be by changing the pressure, it could be using electricity in some way. For us, we use like an electrochemical technology. So it's combining electricity and chemistry together. And this is a type of technology that's spun out of the water purification industry. So it's quite well known. So there's many ways of doing it. On the kind of like kelp side of things, or you could also call it the nature-based solutions, growing trees, growing kelp, these kinds of things. Well, you kind of have to tackle each one in case by case. So kelp, right? There's a company called Running Tide. So they're growing loads of kelp out at sea, and then it sinks to the bottom of the ocean when a certain amount of the kelp is grown, and it can remain there for some really long time scale. But who knows, really? There's a lot of research going into it right now to say, well, how sure are we that when we sink a ton of kelp, that ton of carbon and stuff doesn't come back out into the atmosphere? And so it's kind of a complex problem. So if someone was to pay for that as like an equivalent of ton of carbon removal, how confident albeit at the moment that CO2 is actually permanently removed. And currently people aren't really that confident and are doing a lot of research to find out. And then in the kind of, why don't you just grow more trees? Well, trees are kind of slow. We have a lot of CO2 to remove in a very short space of time. And so trees are not a very fast way of getting there. And trees can burn down. So there's been reforestation projects that have tragically burnt down in places like Spain. So, that you got to think about the insurance aspect of that. And sometimes people end up just growing monocultures of forests, one type of tree that grows really fast. And then from an environmental perspective, that's not so good because then you have this limited biodiversity across a really large space. So, that's not necessarily how it goes about, but that's what often happens within reforestation programs at the moment. So there's a lot of improvement that can be had. So that's a kind of like, a simple description between the two, I think everything has its place. Yeah.
So if I'm remembering right, 70% of like CO2 scrubbing comes from the ocean. And then I think like 70% of the ocean's scrubbing comes from like algae. Like they just convert it into oxygen. So then if we just scale up, really supercharge some algae or genetically modify some to do that better, wouldn't that do the same thing? But without the the commodity side of it. We just let them filter it out and make oxygen again.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting idea that you've thrown out. I think there was a period of time in the planet where something like that kind of happened. I think it's called like the Azolia period or something like that, where there was some algae that was really well evolved for that particular time and just grew massively and sucked up most of the carbon dioxide and caused a big cooling event. And the world restabilized after that. I don't know how long ago that was, maybe 200 million years ago. I'm not really sure. So yeah, in principle, you could do that. There is the question of all this carbon being sequestered in the ocean at that scale, all these organisms, when they run out of nutrients and they die, they start to rot, and that can cause all this anaerobic stuff going on. I'm not really an expert in this, but in cases where you have they call it algal blooms, where fertilizer has run off from the farmland into the sea or into a lake, and then you get this huge bloom of algae, and when it dies and rots because you've run out of nutrients, then it can cause other issues within the within the ecosystem. Have you seen that kind of that Simpsons episode where there's one pest, so they get an animal to eat that pest, and then that pest proliferates, and they have to get another animal to eat that thing, and then you just it's like whack-a-mole.
But the word of the day is eutrophication. I know, but then I double checked it with Google. Eutrophication is the runoff that causes algae blooms and other things to happen, and then they eat all the oxygen and then kill the fish and other things that happen. So yeah, if anyone listening, eutrophication is the word of the day for what he's describing. But yeah, the idea that you use a predator all the way around in a circle. But I think you could just eat algae. I'm not discounting what you're saying.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, no, you scoop it up, turn it into. I mean, what food would you like to turn algae into?
Well, I think it's just. I was talking to Elliot Roth, and his episode's going to go up, I think tomorrow, and you can make pretty much anything with it. As either he's focused on making just pigments, but you can make food with it. I don't see why not. Use it as a scaffolding or whatever, like the protein.
Yeah, grind it into a powder.
Well, I was thinking more like cell egg, you use it as a base for cell agriculture type stuff.
Oh right, yes. I mean, yeah, biology would have a lot of use cases for that. But I'm aware, with insects, a lot of people don't want to eat an actual insect, but turn it into a flour of some kind, and then you can put it into bread, and you can put it into lots of things. So you don't really know that you're eating an insect, but then you are replacing or adding a very I don't know, sustainable food feedstock into our diet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm from Wales, right? There's a type of bread called, like, I think, Bara Breathe, and it's a seaweed based bread. So the Welsh would be probably quite pro this.
Hmm. It's interesting. The only thing I know about Wales is that's where King Arthur came from, allegedly. So you can be descended
Yes,
from him.
although a lot of the Celtic nations do argue about where King Arthur comes from. But yes, I might be. Who knows?
Yeah, I think his name's like Welsh. Like it's like if you look at like his full name isn't like Pendragon some crap. So like
Mm.
like the if you look at his full name, it looks more Welsh than anything else. I don't know. This is your homeland. I don't know
This
anything
is my
about it.
homeland, and actually, I'm currently thinking, oh, what is his full name? I don't know, so I'm I'm
Yeah,
feeling a bit ashamed.
King
So
Arthur's more his like Anglican, like his Anglicanized name. It's not his actual name. It's like I think it's like Uther, and there's like a lot of umlauts and stuff in there. Someone's gonna write in and be like, "Lol, you're a heathen. It's Latin or something." But so the can your
yes.
I'm gonna guess no, but this is like a chemistry question.
Mm.
Can the structure like the process that you're using be used for methane or what's the other one? Nitrous oxide. So the other greenhouse gases. Could you use the same process to
Mm.
and then yeah. It seems like it's specifically engineered for CO2, but like, could you tweak it a bit and use for methane and other things?
Yeah, well, those two gases are quite different, methane and nitrous oxide. So nitrous oxide for sure would get captured by our system. Um, Carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide have a similar property in that they can react with water and form acids
Hmm.
and ionic species in solution, and that's how our process works. So that may be a good thing to some people, could be a bad thing in the long term. We haven't really been able to assess what would happen if nitrous oxide reacts with our system and accumulates. We've done some calcs and we think we're not too worried about it, but that's an ongoing matter. But interestingly, on the NOx subject, we have had an email coming from I can't remember where, but someone who's responsible for an underground motorway
Mm-hmm.
where NOx would inevitably be an issue. I'm not quite sure of the nature of this call yet because this is a very recent development, but they're interested in putting our technology or having that conversation in this underground motorway. And I imagine NOx is the thing that we're going to have to really think about whether we are capturing it, whether that's affecting our system, and whether that's affecting the purity of the CO2 that we're making. So that's something that could either be an opportunity or a challenge. Methane, I'm always thinking about how can we get methane and CO2 captured in our system. Unfortunately, there's not that many materials, or at least that are compatible with our system that could capture methane. There's not really anything that's obvious, and so the next option is how can you just turn the methane into CO2? Because it's in principle, it's a combustible gas, but it's at such a low concentration. I think it's about 4 parts per million or something like that. So doing it in a way that you're not spending loads of energy is challenging. But I would love to find a really selective way that you can target just that 4 in a million 4 molecules of methane in a million molecules of air, a way of targeting that. That people are looking into it, but I don't think there's any credible large scale solutions that people have demonstrated yet.
Is methane heavier or lighter than oxygen?
It's heavier than oxygen. Oh no,
Could you?
sorry, actually, it's lighter. Yeah, it's lighter.
Hmm. Well, I don't know if this works because I'm thinking of a liquid, but I don't know if you do this in gas. But like if you do like the centrifuge thing for like blood,
Mm,
like the heavier platelets will go to the bottom, so then you could use that and then separate it for
yeah,
some other process.
some kind of massive cyclone.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that makes me think about how people make heavy water.
yeah,
Water. You got hydrogen, deuterium, tritium. People basically, purify that by some kind of crazy centrifugation process. So,
yeah,
yeah, in principle, yeah, that could
yeah.
work.
Well, and then you could just go to like some cow ranches where there's just a lot more methane than normal. You know, get straight from the tap essentially, and then it'll be a little easier.
Straight
Instead of
from the
like 4
tap.
parts per million, it'll be like 10 parts per million or something. That's a
Oh, it'd
little
be
easier to
way
grab.
more like
Yeah.
yeah, they're like the cows are like the equivalent of chimneys in the CO2 industry, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well,
It-
this kind of goes. No, you're gonna say something.
oh, I was just going to say there is more direct ways of dealing with it, this source, and I think there's been some interesting research whereby giving cows a uh, certain extracts in their food, that disrupts the bacteria that make methane. So there's some nifty. I think that's coming more from the biochemical space. There's like garlic extracts and seaweeds cropping up again, seaweed extracts that actually prevent it from being formed in the gut in the first place, which is quite interesting.
I don't know if you got these commercials when you were a kid, but they would feed chocolate milk to a cow and then shake it, and then you could have chocolate milk come from it. And it kind of feels like that. So I don't believe it. Even though, like, chemically, I'm sure it makes sense, but I just feel like it's the equivalent of like feeding it chocolate milk and shaking the cow and expecting chocolate milk to come out. I don't know. It probably makes sense, but I'm like, that's what I'm picturing. You just like feed it like a chocolate milk type thing. I don't know if you ever saw those commercials. They were all a lie for everyone else listening. Do not feed a cow chocolate milk.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're just making me think about whether anyone's going to be mad enough to try and genetically modify a cow to make chocolate milk.
I've thought about it. You can kind of do it. You can. I mean, if you can get goats to make spider silk, I don't see why you can't make chocolate milk.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Hopefully, someone listening gets the idea takes on that idea in their own research.
Yeah, I think the only problem is that people who are smart in that type of stuff, they usually want to do something entirely synthetic, like eggs without chickens or something. Like they don't want to like make the chickens, have chocolate eggs or whatever. I don't know if the comparison there would be. They tend to just want to really go towards like the extremes of it. Like what if we could do like chocolate milk without any cow, like dairy free milk and stuff like that. Yeah, I feel like that's like you'd have to have someone who's kind of like I don't know, like who's in the dairy industry and wants to preserve the cow way of life or something, like in terms of like agriculture. Because I think they would just do it completely synthetically. I don't think they would actually make the cow do it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Require an anti-vegan lobbyist to fund it.
Yeah. Then so when you were describing the DAC technology a minute ago, it kind of gave me the impression of, and not in a bad way, but it kind of reminded me of like nuclear power plants, where you hear nuclear power plants, you think, oh, this is going to be complex. It's going to be really cool. No, it's steam turning a turbine. Like that's how boring it's like a nuclear plant is. That's all it is. It's like it's steam that's generated by the nuclear fission, and it turns a turbine, and that is where electricity comes from. I always felt it should be more cool than that, but it's not. But at the same time, your technology seems quite simple. You get the CO2 some way, either like it filters in or whatever like that extraction method is, and then you spray it at water, and then it bonds with the water, and then you either keep it as a solid or you make it as a liquid container and go use it for something else. But that's a kind of like a really kind of simplistic way, but also kind of like it's kind of just like disappointing in how simple it is what I'm saying. Like, so
I can tell you. I can tell you a little bit more depth and interesting things about it. So so that first process, you just mix CO2 and the air together. Well, it's not just water that you need. You need to have a chemical in there that can accelerate the reaction, because CO2 dissolving into water. Well, once water doesn't want to contain too much CO2, so you have to make it alkaline, and then you can store a lot more CO2 in there. But two, that reaction is still a bit slow. And so you need to find the right chemical that can accelerate that. There's a range of things that already exist in industry. One thing that's a bit of a hot topic in the carbon capture space at the moment is an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. So this is an enzyme that's in all of our bodies. It's responsible for taking CO2 from the blood, where it's being produced by our cells, and turning it into ions, little charged molecules. And then those charged molecules end up in our lungs, where that same enzyme does the reverse reaction and turns those charged molecules back into CO2, and then we respire it. So people are doing evolutionary design of these enzymes. They're like trying to find enzymes in cold places or really hot places that, that may have some interesting properties. So they're super stable or they're super active because they have to, maybe in a cold place that enzymes had to develop extra speed in order to keep up with the challenges of respiration. So that's, we're interested in that. And I'm sure a bunch of other DAT companies are interested in that in some way, but it's not suitable for all the technologies. So yeah, there's some innovation required there to get the CO2 fast enough into your solution. That's the capture stage. That's getting into the liquid. The release stage is kind of simple, but also quite technical. So there's these, we use these stacks. They're called electrodialysis stacks, and they consist of essentially 200, 300, 400 parallel channels separated by membranes. And these channels allow two different fluids to flow past each other without mixing. And the membranes are selective for particular ions. In our case, we have a membrane that's selective towards negatively charged ions. And then we have another membrane that can split water into acid and alkali. And essentially, we use this piece of technology. It's existed for quite some time, but there's still a lot of optimization to be done to grab the CO2 that we've stored in solution in the form of carbonate and bicarbonate ions, move it into a new solution, a totally different solution that's now tuned to be acidic and to be an environment where those ions are really unstable, and just reverse the reaction back to CO2. And all of this requires a voltage to be applied from one end to the other that moves the ions in the right directions and helps split the water into acid and alkali. And so, yeah, again, visually, it's quite simple. I could show you how the stacks work and you'd get a feel for it. But then part of the challenge is integrating these two processes together, making sure all the chemistry is compatible, and that it's all running efficiently. That takes quite a bit of time, and that's what we've been up to, for the most part for the last 2 years.
Yeah, it sounds much more complicated now that we got into the details. So the special sauce of what you're developing versus normal off-the-shelf type technology, is the membrane unique at all, or are you just using something that exists? I don't know anything about chemistry. Chemistry makes no sense to me.
Yeah, well, our whole strategy as a business is to minimize, at least for our first product, minimize the amount of bespoke components that we have to manufacture and figure that out ourselves. We always outsource or buy in what is available to the greatest degree that we can, unless there is some great opportunity in figuring it out, in making something ourselves and doing that. So yeah, we have that tilt because we want to get products to market as soon as possible and iterate off them. Because this is a big problem. We're running, fossil fuels will run out someday, and we have a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere to clean up from a party of 200 years plus that we've been doing. And so in some ways, we can't spend, 10, 20 years doing something really hard to figure out. We need to use very available technologies and equipment. But so the special sauce, you kind of raised before, is it's just all that know-how of how you get the system to work well, and the specific concentrations, compositions of these liquid streams that make it work in an optimal sense. You can't have you have lots of trade-offs everywhere. If you adjust one thing, something else gets worse, and then you try and make that thing better, and then something else gets worse. So there's so many trade-offs, so many variables. We end up using modeling to actually kind of figure that out, because otherwise the experimental number is too high. But yeah, that's a kind of that's the way you should be thinking about it.
Is there an optimal size for this? where too much bigger and it starts like you have to do a lot more work to find all the balances, but too small you don't get the desired result of pulling as much CO2 out of the air as you want?
Well, yeah, in terms of like appropriate sizing, some of it comes from actually what are the limitations of what you can buy. So when it comes to fans and the system, the thing that um, that the module or the container that essentially you're using to capture the CO2 in, you want to use the most efficient fans and the largest fans because they're going to work out to be cheapest because of economies of scale and the fan design that you can use. But that is when you want a really big plant. That's when you're going to a plant that's capturing hundreds or millions of tons of CO2 from the air per year. Currently, we're kind of going for a shipping container design, and that naturally places some limitations on the size. But the shipping container design that we have, from a scaling, like efficiency perspective, the way from an energy consumption perspective and stuff like that, we're at that point where you know how it scales. It scales in a very linear way, the performance. For the electrochemistry, there is at the moment a kind of optimum size. These stacks have to have all the fluids moving in just the right way. You don't want any dead zones. You want all the fluid moving the same speed. And so then it becomes like a fluid dynamics question that gets more and more challenging the bigger the stack gets. So generally, you don't find things bigger than like a meter by meter wide. That would be really big. And so they kind of look at, they look like things the size of like a really big family fridge. That's kind of like the size of those modules.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So then, how do you plan to manufacture them? Is it going to be an in-house thing, or are you going to just like find a Southeast Asia or a place in Mexico that'll build them for you at scale?
Yeah, no, it's at scale. We may get into manufacturing them ourselves. We anticipate that there will be, kind of customizations that we want to do that other companies may not be offering. At the moment, though, for our pilot plants that we're currently procuring the equipment for and getting ready to deliver, we're working with other companies that are building them. As a startup, it's just a much more convenient way to go about it. But in the future, when we envision a kind of gigafactory like production of things such as our stacks. Making them in the same way that cars are assembled, although they're much simpler, a lot fewer pieces than cars. But that is the scale of the problem, is that when we reach that mature stage, in order to keep up with the targets of CO2 removal required to mitigate a really bad warming scenario, we'll need, effectively gigafactory pumping out these units and building plants all over the world.
How many of container-sized boxes do you need to actually make a dent in the CO2?
Oh, right. If we're thinking about shipping containers.
Yeah, that's roughly the size of one unit, right? Yeah. Yeah. How many shipping containers of your thing do you need?
Oof, I've never done this calculation before. We usually, because when you go to the mega scale, you abandon the shipping container idea because it doesn't really make sense to have 10,000 shipping containers or something like that. So to get to a million tons of capture per year, which is about 100,000 people's worth of CO2. You would need something on the order of 10,000 to 50,000 shipping containers.
Is a million the goal?
A million is kind of the size plant that people are talking about. It's the biggest size plant that anyone's talking about, and that's coming from a joint venture between Carbon Engineering one of the first DAT companies, and I think Oxy Ventures and Oxy or something like that. 1.5 is one of the project developers. And so they're building or designing and building these plants in the Permian Basin, but unfortunately they have a part of their use case will be for enhanced oil recovery. So that's injecting CO2 into the well so you can pump out more oil. And so that's obviously a hot and controversial topic in direct air capture. So people say, hey, that's just making the oil less emitting, or has less of an impact. And other people feel like that is just giving a license to these oil companies to continue operations far longer than we need to have them around. Because obviously we need oil, right? But how long is this transition going to take? And if we give a moral license to enhanced oil recovery, is that just going to drag out this transition and slow the rate of change within our industries? So yeah, like as someone kind of stepping into this conversation, what's your first thoughts or feelings about the concept of enhanced oil recovery?
I'm completely indifferent to it as long as it gets the job done. Yeah, it's like it's like as long as it does what it needs to do, and it doesn't cause more pollutions or runoff, and it's more safe and whatnot, then I don't mind. I guess that my only concerns would be: is it safe? Does it work as intended? Is it gonna, I don't know, cause oil spills or something, like build up more pressure that the pipes aren't used to dealing with? Yeah, I mean, morally, I'm indifferent. It's just like, it's if it works. I'd rather not have people die from climate change. That's more important to me than not using oil. Like, I don't care if we have to use oil to get there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we have to spend oil in order to get there, right? Because we need the energy, we need the economies to work, we need we need to continue being a sophisticated, industrialized countries that can do the R&D to manage the transition. Enhanced oil recovery, in principle, reduces the CO2 intensity, but it's a crystal ball kind of speculation if it delays the transition or not. But I guess a lot of people will be like, well, we shouldn't really trust oil companies given their level of given that they've perhaps led misinformation campaigns about climate change, and not always true to their words, and they're not known anyway for being an industry of sort of ethical not sure what the word I'm looking for, ethical practice or something.
Yeah. Well, I think businesses are as ethical as we allow them to be. So if the oil companies are doing bad things, it's because we don't put in the regulation and make the cost of doing them worse than just doing the right thing. Like there's this great TV show called I think it's Mr. Robot. I know Robot's in the name. And there's like this oil spill causes cancer for a bunch of people. And this woman spends like a whole season trying to get a settlement. And eventually she finds the right leverage to get her the settlement she wants. And the guy's like, when we first did this, the money we saved by cutting this corner, we put into a fund. And that fund has made 10 times what you're asking for. So you can have your victory here. We've already made more money from it. So it's like that is how I feel most things are set up. For instance, one is like parking tickets, right? An argument can be made that parking tickets are just the cost of rich people to park there.
Yeah. No, I mean, some people treat it like that, right?
Yeah. So like, are the regulations and penalties sufficient that people will not do those things? They're not, so they're going to keep doing them and polluting the environment and blowing stuff up. So they're like, I don't blame the oil company for acting in the most evil way possible. That's just evolution of biology. I think it's our fault for tolerating it and not putting in laws and stuff to do against it. But I do hear your point that given how things are currently set up, you probably wouldn't want to trust them. But then it's how we set things up so that we can trust them. I don't think so. The what if I think about like where's the best use of your technology? I was thinking you could go to where all the coal plants are, where all like the mega producers are, and then just like slam your thing right in there, and that could just be a cost associated that the government mandates, for instance, or just like there's an incentive there for them to do it, and then that stops the pollution. There's a really great documentary called Empowered. The lady who made it was on the show, and she went to a coal town, and the coal town was just like they loved their coal plant, even though they had coal everywhere, and it was like messing the air and stuff because they had the best teachers. They had all these things. Like coal plants have a very positive impact on their in their environment, weirdly enough, when it comes to the people, but also they have their costs and effects. But so like if you could take that coal plant, which then has those downsides, bring in a couple of shipping containers of your technology, some DACs or some DAC boxes or whatever you want to call them, and then like offset that'd be kind of nice. And during the interregnum of like moving the transition over, if that's the idea. But regardless of whether or not we completely leave coal or not, it'll scrub it out, make it clean, essentially, like get rid of the CO2, and you can make money. Capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, that is so that's a family of technologies called point source capture. So that's a much more mature industry than direct air capture. Direct air capture only turned up in the world about 14 years ago or so. Point source has been around for a few more decades than that. Like has had its ups and downs, and it's kind of back on and up. Part of the challenge is then what do you do with the CO2? Is that power plant in a place where there is that storage available, or is there a pipeline that can then pipe your CO2 to a place that it's useful? Because as soon as you start trucking around CO2, you're kind of just defeating your purpose. So yeah, there are a bunch of plants where this kind of co-location requirement is set up. So, and in those cases, why not? You're just cleaning up your waste. It's like it kind of just makes sense. And the cost of it has fallen quite a lot.
It doesn't sound like that's your use case, though.
That's not our use case. That's not that's not like our that's not our motivation at the moment. Because ultimately DAC is needed regardless. Point source should happen. There's lots of great people doing that. We started Mission Zero. We thought, okay, DAC is just beginning. There was a few companies to talk about when we started, and we felt we had something to offer that no one else was talking about. But now, 3 years since we started, we've gone from, okay, so there's 3 companies in 2009, ish, maybe a couple more, 12-ish companies around 3 years ago when we started, and now there's probably 250 companies on our, company database of people claiming to do DAC. Actually, it doesn't sound like it's very relevant to what you're saying, but I guess the point is like DAC is serving a different need, because even once you've captured all the carbon from all the coal plants and gas plants, there's still a couple hundred gigatons of CO2 kicking around that still shouldn't be there. There's still a landfill somewhere that we haven't thought about, and that's DAC's opportunity.
So yeah, then where's the most, if you blanket regulation to just allow you to go wherever you want, you don't have to work with the governments, will just let you in, put you wherever you want, do whatever you say. Where's the optimal places where's the optimal use cases for your technology then? Like where should they be? What should they be doing?
What the optimal thing that we like is temperate climates that don't get too cold and don't get too hot. And that particular area has an abundance of renewable electricity. So there's actually a lot of places around the planet right now that has huge amounts of renewable electricity curtailed every year because the grid isn't adapted to variable energy supplies, or there's just too much. So taking a couple examples, Scotland has so much wind power, it often doesn't know what to do with it. And I think something like on the order of £1 billion of wind power is wasted each year in the UK because we can't transport it very well from the north of the UK and Scotland down to the south, where there's much more energy consumption. So unfortunately, that's not a good situation. And then another case that we find quite interesting. So we're in talks with a company in Canada that has access to a lot of hydroelectric power. And in this case, it's a very consistent source of energy, unlike wind. And the reason it has abundance is because they just built these huge reservoirs, decades ago, and they just get so much water. They just don't know what to do with the energy. So you have really cheap, really clean energy coming from these hydroelectric dams in Canada. So for us, actually the other thing that's worth pointing out, we don't work very well in a place where there's water scarcity. We do need water, and at scale we need a lot of water. Not so much that it hurts our economics, but so much that if you're in a place where people are like, hey, we don't have enough water for ourselves, then we're not going to be helping that situation by moving in there. So we have to be sensitive to that as well. And so that's the particular use case for us. And interestingly, many other DAC technologies have different types of optimal situations. Climeworks, they use a lot of heat, and so their favorite place is somewhere with loads of geothermal energy. So they've set up in Iceland. Other DAC companies have said, well, maybe we can use the ocean as our source of CO2. So they got to co-locate with the ocean, and so there's a range of other companies that have different niches, just like in an ecological system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that explains why you're building a pilot plant in Oman then. It's got kind of all of that. As long as you have desalination with the Gulf. Not the Gulf.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a Gulf over there. It's a different Gulf, though.
It's a different. Yeah. They have a lot of desalination in Oman. So even though it seems like a water scarce place, desalination is not that expensive. So it doesn't kill the economics of our process.
Yeah. Why didn't you pick Israel then? They have like the best desalination in the Middle East, and it's pretty warm there, I think. They have deserts nearby.
Not? Why
yeah.
Not?
Yeah. Why Oman over other places in the area?
Well, the Oman project, that came about via X Prize and
okay.
And our networks, and it was a very organic thing that cropped up. So yeah, sometimes you just pick the opportunities that come to you as a startup, right? We don't necessarily have the luxury of like looking at the geographic map and be like, there. We just have to work with our partners that we know at the time.
Yeah, I was recently talking to a friend of mine who's in the Middle East a lot, and he said that if you're building a company and you live in you're a Western person building technology and you're moving it to the Middle East, that the Middle East is extremely supportive of helping you get your company, your technology built up out there, like to the point where like they'll subsidize workers and material procurement stuff. But it depends on the country. I don't know, how friendly is Oman to the process, I guess.
I think they're quite pro. I think they're quite pro carbon capture. Their desert has loads of peridotite, a mineral that reacts with CO2. And they've, so Talal, who's from 4401, he's the CEO of the company that is developing an injection technology that is injecting fizzy water into the ground where all this peridotite is. And the Omani government has been incredibly supportive in his project, basically giving him the right to pilot this in quite a large amount of space. So they're very forward thinking, and that we've had lots of reach outs from different Middle Eastern companies that want to demonstrate DAC in different environments. So they're quite forward thinking. I mean, they've got all this renewable energy. They know that oil's not going to be around forever. They want to be part of the solution, and so they're quite open to that. And I think the business cultures are quite compatible as well. So it's going to be an area where we'll probably see a lot of future DAC deployments.
So then, if the goal is to get 1 million tons out of it, like just scrub 1 million, I think it's 1 million tons, right? Or 1 million pounds.
1 million tons for that's like a big plant, like one big plant.
I thought it was like all the plants together. I thought it was like cumulatively the goal was to build as many plants horizontally. No, I'm asking you. Like, this is a clarification question. Is your goal to build enough plants horizontally to get 1 million pounds per year? Yeah, or go ahead. I think we might be disconnected on that.
Oh yeah, no, slightly off on that. Just that 1 million tons is the target size of a large scale DAC plant. It's used as a number because when we do our modeling of how the cost of capture changes with scale, by 1 million tons, you've really got your economy scale quite large. You've got your, equipment cost down, and that's when you can get to really, the costs of capture that most people have agreed on will be accessible to a really large part of industry to fund. Lots of companies are paying DAC companies a certain amount of money per ton. Currently they're paying 500 to thousands of pounds or dollars per ton of CO2 captured because they want to support these new technologies. But everyone feels like the goal must be to get the cost of capture to $200 per ton, $100 per ton, or even less. And the only way that people's models really get there is when you say, well, let's make 1 million ton plant, 1 million tons per year plant. So, that's the future for a lot of DAC companies. Then it becomes a little bit centralized. And then, the number that we're talking about that we all want to actually capture is then in, as a collection of companies, as an industry, is in the, tens to hundreds of gigatons of CO2 removed. I think people talk about 200 gigatons of CO2 should be removed. There's no perfect number though, right?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get is like the threshold for success as you delineate it. So when, like, you could, if your company just kept going, eventually just keep scaling to get as much as you want, right? But you also have those like MVP, the first stages of success where you can sit back and say, wow, I've done something good here with the carbon capture we're doing. We're out of the pilot plant. We're doing X per year. I'm potentially doing, like where you feel good about it. Like, what is that threshold?
Okay. Well, yeah. So our first plants, right, that we're talking about hundreds to 1,000 tons per year of, the first generation one of our plants. So they're, maybe a ton a day, something in that range, not huge. I'm going to feel quite happy when this plant, pilot plants are, up and online. That's going to be a massive, personal and collective achievement of our company. It's no joke, building a pilot plant for the first time. But the kind of size or scale where things are getting really interesting is in the 10,000 to 100,000 ton per year range. There's a lot of use cases for CO2 in the 10,000 ton range. So companies that might want to make fuels from our carbon dioxide, or companies that want to make building materials from our carbon dioxide. There's a lot of customers that actually just want CO2 at that amount. So that's kind of what we should be thinking about when we hear the 10,000 ton range. And we'll be really happy when we're selling CO2 at that scale to a customer. We've got a good business proposition there. And then when we're talking about removal and just permanently getting it out of the atmosphere, the big plants that will, wow everyone are the, 100,000 tons and above. So no one's built, plants on that scale yet. And we're all trying to get there over the next, before 2030. And that will, the first plant above that will be, big news, really big news.
Yeah.
Maybe just like one point of comparison is Climeworks have a 4,000 ton a year plant operating that I think turned up something like last summer, and that was a big story. 4,000 tons per year. One of the first companies to get there, and their ambition is 40,000 in maybe in another year's time, something like that, a 10x of that. I guess it's like leaping up one order of magnitude at a time, and the first to get there is the big milestone.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then, for the sake of the conversation, every question I'm going to ask thereafter is going to be about the $10,000 to $100,000 range, 100 ton range, because that's like where I think you lit up a little bit in terms of the, like, no one's done it. You'll have partners, like there'll be utility in what you can capture and have usable elsewhere. Then, so one clarification question: do you need one Omni plant to reach that level, or can you build a bunch of small pilot plants in an area to reach the same level? And is it optimally to build one giant, I guess, versus a bunch of small ones?
Yeah, I will segment that into utilization and removal. They're like different games. And for utilization, if someone wants commodity grade CO2, then you can only supply as much CO2 as they use. And so, a lot of these are the smaller end of that scale, and removal will be a much larger end. So like removal for us is like the plant will need to be as big as people are willing to finance, and as big as the storage constraint of the storage section is. So there may be the plant gets limited by how much the rate that you can store. And we don't really know what that upper limit is in all locations, but sometimes, like the classic, or the current, storage mechanism that is being used by Climeworks or 4401 is injecting fizzy water under the ground, and it carbonates. And each one of those wells can only handle a few thousand tons. So they're going to have loads of wells decentralized over a large amount of land, and then you may have multiple smaller facilities co-locating with those wells. It's not really a one simple answer. It's very much always like it depends. Where the scalability does increase a lot is when you have a pipeline, and that pipeline goes to a gas field or some kind of haven, something that you can just inject at a really fast rate. So then you can imagine just bigger is better, as big as that pipeline can handle. That's so it does really vary between the decentralized, lots of companies, lots of different plants, and you're just tuning your product to what that customer needs, to a very centralized model potentially, where you just need to get the cost down as low as possible when you just want to pump CO2 down a pipeline.
Yeah. For the people who are going to pump the CO2 into the ground to make fizzy water or whatever, are they in America? It sounds very similar to like fracking, what we have to do to get the oil out of the shale or whatever. And that has resulted in, I believe, earthquakes and pollution of water and all these other things. Are there concerns about causing other ecological issues by doing that?
I haven't heard much concerns and I haven't heard of any earthquakes yet.
Well, yeah, early days
yet. I don't think they drill as deep. They don't use chemicals that cause fracturing within the rock. They're generally injecting into rocks that are very porous and volcanic, at least in the Iceland case. And so it's a much gentler, slower process where the object isn't to crack and frack and create fractures within the ground. I think fracking also, it goes down and then it goes horizontally under a really long, it affects a wide area. Where currently the way that people are drilling and injecting, you just drill one vertical shaft, and then you just pump high pressure water in it. You just let it filter through this porous rock.
Hmm.
So yeah, fortunately, it's a bit of a different thing, and at the very least, there's no chemicals other than CO2 and water going down. So you're not, fracking is also right. It's like associated with like damaging some water supplies. So
Yeah.
you don't have to run into that risk either.
It also sounds like if there was those risks, if 10 years from now we realize, hey, there's a lot of earthquakes coming around this region, for whatever, where these plants are, it doesn't sound like you actually need the ground. Like you probably make some type of like container thing, like for fermentation to do something similar. I feel like you can make a synthetic version of what they're accomplishing in the ground, above ground, so they wouldn't cause it if that problem was happening. Versus fracking, you kind of have to do that to get the oil. I feel like you don't need that. It sounds like you wouldn't need it. Even if it was, you could potentially work your way around it, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, for sure. And kind of what you're saying describes a little bit about the opportunity with the mining industries. So, once you've dug into a quarry and you've got the metal ore that you're interested in, you also have a lot of other rock that you don't, there's very limited or zero or negative economic value to. Partly because, well, yeah, no one wants to buy it, and the reason why it may be negative economic value is because it may contain heavy metals that pose an environmental risk, and so you have to ensure that these metals don't leach out into the water supply. So this is an interesting area where DAC can carbonate these mine tailings and kind of cement them up. They have to, and they're effectively just landfilled, or they're right next to where the mine is. You have these huge stacks of rubble, and you can make them safer and store carbon in them, and it represents a huge opportunity to improve the sustainability of mining. And then, as you say, you don't have to worry about actually drilling into the Earth's crust.
Yeah, because it's already been drilled. Well, not drilled, it's been dug. So it's already there.
Yeah,
like, it's a sunk cost. Yeah,
but the damage has already been done.
Yeah, that's nice. But you can use something bad for something good. So for a 10,000 ton plant per year, how much does it cost to build something like that? And then what would be the operating costs like per year?
Yeah, so 10,000 tons per year, if we were to just simply scale up from our small plants, we're kind of talking about something, I think, in the range, we haven't done it yet. So it's very dangerous to talk about cost about things you haven't yet done. But I'll start from where we are right now. So we're talking about, like 2 to 3 million for our plants that are on the scale of like 1 ton per day, maybe a bit more with some tweaks. And then so that's maybe 20x or something like that. So what are we talking about there? Something like maybe I think with the economies of scale, you're probably looking at something like 15 mil for like a 10,000 ton plant. But it's hard to say like where the economies of scale comes in, but that's what I'd roughly expect.
Yeah, you're gonna know more after the pilot plant. This is kind of like asking you a very like thought hypothesis question. Anyone listening in that's like 50 million, that's a lot. I don't know, I'm not gonna invest in this company. Like they're gonna learn more at the pilot program after the pilot plant. So let's ease up a little bit. It'll probably be less.
Yeah.
That's how that works. You're a scientist, so I imagine you average up.
Yeah, well, part of the challenge with like a pilot, right, is that you are on an ambitious timeline because you want to grow as a company, you want to get investment. And so again, there's trade-offs. How many different suppliers do you go for to get the lowest cost? And do you try and get it manufactured in China, or do you just get someone get it from a company in the Netherlands where you might be the level of trust might be a bit higher, or the risk tolerance is a bit different. So all that value engineering comes when you can say, we're trying to build a plant in 3 years' time, and we have the time to figure out where all the best places are to buy the stuff. When you say we're trying to get this plant from like detailed design to operation in 12 to 18 months, then you don't have as much luxury for cost reduction, unfortunately.
Yeah. So then 15 million to build a 10,000 ton plant of 30 tons per day being filtered. What do you make off of that? What was like the expectation? Like how much people are going to pay you?
Well, there's different models.
Yeah.
And maybe this is, I'm not gonna quote any specific numbers here. This is like
yeah, just give a range. I'm curious about the profitability as a business.
Well, so the way that we look at it is, because there's lots of different models here, and one way we're looking at the model right now is we sell the capex. So we make some money on the capex, not a huge amount, but then we enter into a maintenance agreement. So that over the lifetime of the plant, we make sure that it's running well. We provide really good data on how the different components are performing. And perhaps we'll have some kind of royalty on every ton that is captured. That's a hypothetical thing that we're testing out with potential customers. It's kind of akin to maybe the Rolls-Royce model. They make jet engines, and they earn a little fee on every mile that engine is flown. So, so that's, you don't want to lump someone with too much capex. So you want to kind of lower the amount of upfront payment for a customer, and then have some, long-term revenue stream that allows you to maintain your viability of your business, especially in the days where your technology is relatively new, and people don't really know how well it will perform over 10 or 20 years. That most people, a lot of the time pretty much all the time when someone quotes, "Oh, our technology produces CO2 at a cost of $300 per ton," they're levelizing that capex and opex over 20 years to get to that number. So when we're building plants and we're talking about this number, we're kind of imagining that we can keep it running for 20 years, and it has a purpose for 20 years. That's obviously a big assumption given the rate of change of technologies. But that's kind of how the chemical industry works. If you're building a plant that makes fuels, chemicals, methanol or something, you have a lot of plants that are running on lower tech because they have to run for 20 years to make sense from a profitability perspective.
I was working on a house, and to upgrade the wiring was really annoying. You had to like blow out all the walls and stuff. And I'm always wondering, is it possible to make a modular system so I can like pop the wall off and then slot in like the upgraded equipment or whatever? It's like with a PC case, right? There's a lower end of hard drive and all these different things you can get, but you can then upgrade to a certain point. Do you build the facility in a modular way so that you can slot in upgraded RAM, I guess, as an analogy, so it can grow and to have a really long life as you continue to develop? And the nice side there is it's upsell as you develop more technology for the plant.
Yeah, no, you just raised something that we think about, how to address the problem that we've just been talking about. I'd love that to happen in my house. So the components of the system are modular. So the stacks that I talked about are modular, so they can be replaced. The membranes, if we find better membranes or develop better membranes, they can just be swapped out, and you keep the same, functional housing of the stack. All the chemistry is, in a sense, modular, right? If you say, oh, actually, we've developed a better capture solvent, then we'll just drain the system of the capture solvent and give you version 2.0. So we do like to, promote our technology on the basis of your technology can get better over time. That the product that we give you can get better over time. You'll get version updates. Even the contactor. So the contactor is the box that captures the CO2. it has these high surface area materials in there that allow your air and liquid to flow past each other. If you Google what a packing material is in the context of cooling towers, you'll see these like PC boxes of all these like interesting geometric channels. And there is a lot of optimization to be done there for direct air capture specifically. All the available ones have been designed for a different application for cooling, and it's not the same optimization function. They're not, they're not a million miles off, but they're going to get better. So again, you can take all these boxes of PVC out and then slot in new ones when we develop them. So yeah, and that's a good thing you reminded me of. That our technology isn't this like fixed thing. You dump it on the ground, then 20 years later it's the same thing. I'll be very disappointed if that is what turns out to be the case.
Yeah, I think I understand your business model and what you're building more now. I didn't know if it was. I always wondered, like, where does the stream stop in terms of like people like partnering and it becomes like a product that they sell to other people. And so the analogy I'd make is like, is if Tesla built gigafactories, like you're basically a gigafactory that makes batteries, and then you like license. Actually, that's a terrible analogy. You're like the software brain side of things, and you're going to manufacture these things, then license it to other people. So the operating costs of it running are given to other people to
Yes.
take care of. And then the software, all that other type of stuff is baked into it. And then your incentive is to make it as efficient as possible, make it as best as possible, so then they can improve their margins, and they want to keep buying and scaling up as needed. And then, having a modular system so you can have people who want to like dip their toe into it is also, that's another aspect to it. Kind of like the Mac, like the Apple thing, where it's like you can get like the basic thing, which is kind of okay, which is still very expensive, or a slightly more expensive thing, and then by the end of it, it's like 5,000, three or four times more expensive. So like, there's also that added benefit in terms of like the pricing structure. So now I understand more why you would potentially want to bring in manufacturing in-house as something you want to control, and then because that's going to be a big component of deliverable, like getting it to someone in a way that is manufacturable, scalable, and controlled, versus like partnering with someone to have them handle that side of it. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of iterations and a lot of things going into it. While you could partner with people to have them come in, if that's a big part of what you're building, I could see why putting all in-house makes sense.
Yeah, and we're not going to get there, next year. This is, bringing everything house is a journey. Like we can come up with the plant design, all the schematics, and the user guides, and we can say, okay, here's the design. You go sell that to customers and build it for them. But then we don't have control over what is actually the best components, what's the best materials. And we don't want to be associated with someone who's not optimizing for the best customer experience. I really love the utilization angle of CO2. I care about the removals, but I really got into being fascinated about CO2 from the perspective of transforming it into things. And so, I love thinking about it from a kind of a product offering perspective. Like CO2 is this molecule that we all hate, but at the same time, is the molecule that all life uses, all plants use to grow and to make the food that we eat, to make the clothes that we wear. It's just fascinating that biology has been able to leverage the ability of this molecule, but we are still demonizing it and haven't yet quite figured out how to efficiently use it in the same way. And so, my vision has always been when we can transform CO2 into the molecule that replaces fossil fuels, we'll have ended, one of the biggest challenges that we've been facing for the challenges that we've been facing in terms of, the threat of global warming. It's arguably we're still doing quite well as a species. GDP is increasing, populations are increasing, but we can't go on that way forever, right? So there's going to be a point.
Have you seen the population statistics, like the numbers when you add sugar to a petri dish with a bacteria in it? You ever just like look at that? It goes up, up, and
Yeah,
up, and up. And like, I bet when they're at the top, they're like, wow, it's always going to keep getting better. Let's multiply like normal. And then they eat out all the sugar and then it crashes and they all die. And there's like a small population at the end of it. But right before it
yes.
crashes, everyone thinks it's really nice.
Yeah, everyone's like, hey, this is great. Look at all the abundance.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, and there's the odd case, right, where people have consumed all their resources. There's that island where
Easter
people
Island
got
head.
Easter Island had people consumed all their resources, and then they didn't last too long. These are kind of closed systems, and so
Mhm.
I do believe in the whole system, with our ability to innovate, our ability to return waste products back into feedstocks, and our ability to work with the ecosystems, the oceans, the forests, the farmland. We're not going to run into that. I think, when you have a large enough system, there's so much abundance there that at least I'm not worried that we're going to face a similar destiny as a mole in a petri dish. But
Yeah. Well, I hope not. We're pretty adaptable as a species. So,
exactly,
yeah.
it's amazing. It's amazing how adaptable we are, how diverse we are.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's a good time to be alive. Either we pull together and we do a great job and the world is
yeah.
better, or we go and become mole people. That's an exciting future. That's exciting.
Where's your money?
Where's my money? In mole
Yeah.
people's time? What do you mean?
Oh no, I mean, what's your bet? I mean, are you relatively optimistic on the
Yeah, I'm
adaptation
optimistic.
side?
Either we'll solve it or our AI overlords will kind of make us like farm animals in the sense of like we'll be like manicured gardens and they'll take care of it for us and they'll slowly wean us down on our population and we'll just lead just comfortable lives that the AI optimized for happiness for.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's like I don't think AI will kill us because I think we I don't I don't think AI will kill us because I don't think it's optimized for that. It's like a paperclip maker, like in terms of like making more paper clips. And so I think if we don't solve it, I think I could see like a rogue AI being like maximize human happiness, maximize human happiness. It's like, well, at a certain population density, we're all really unhappy. So it's just like, well, we're going to release a chemical into the air and make fertility decrease or whatever. It's like not kill everyone, just slowly wean them off because killing people makes people unhappy too. So you don't kill them.
Oh yes.
Yeah, but
Yes,
then
but also maybe, telling people how many children they can have might be
oh, you don't tell them
might
that. No, you don't tell
oh,
them that. They can
oh
adopt.
right.
They can
Okay,
adopt.
okay. People are like, oh, I don't know, we just can't have children. That is not
That's
so
already
nice.
happening
But
with plastic pollution and stuff. Like there's a significant decrease in fertility. For all we know, the AI is already taken over and slowly. We're already doing a lot of AI's work. It just needs to come with the last mile, last deliverable. But in terms of optimism, yeah, I think we're fine. We're not going to die out anytime soon. Maybe like a couple 100,000 years, we'll probably change it as a species. But then it's
yeah,
like,
when there's something we can't control anymore, like the sun dying out, or I don't know, a mega asteroid. Well, actually, no, I kind of hope that we can save ourselves from asteroids.
you just go underground,
Hmm.
mole people,
The,
or you
the
fire a
the
nuke at it.
the Yes.
You don't do that. That's a joke. That just make
No.
more pebbly things, more meteors.
Yeah. The AI piece is interesting actually from the perspective of like currently algorithms. I don't know if you call algorithms AI, but they're optimizing for our engagement and they're optimizing for like returning like advertising revenues. So it's like how could you align the financial interests of algorithms, not for our engagement, but for actual well-being? How can you take the advantage of capitalism for actual well-being rather than stimulation? If someone solves that would be great.
I think Elon Musk said if you add like a carbon tax, it'll be solved in like a couple of years.
Yes, that's true. Again, it's coming back to the point of appropriate regulation. If
Yeah.
none of these technologies are good or bad. They're agnostic in that sense. If you apply the appropriate regulation, if you price in the price of carbon to your products, then it would instantly make our business models viable without having to do very much. And actually, when you think about it for certain consumer products, it's really marginal adding in that cost. So let's say like taking a carton of milk or something like that. So a carton of milk is like, I don't know, $1, $2, I don't know, something like that.
A carton, is it like 1 liter? How much milk is it?
Let's say a liter. Let's say a liter of milk.
It can range from 97 cents to $4 on average.
Okay. So we could start with the premium milks. That's where people have the most willingness for price changes. I think we're talking about a couple of kilos for every kilo of milk. And so, at the price of like $500 a ton, you add 50 cents, something like that onto a carton of milk. Like I think there's already a relative amount of people that would start adding, between 10 to 50 cents onto a product to make it carbon neutral. I don't know why that's not being done yet more, but
well, it's kind of a big increase though. It's milk. Milk,
milk.
50 cents, a 50 cents increase on milk might make it the price where people can't afford it. People are already struggling to afford food as it is.
Yes, so I'd start with the premium kind of milks for the for the
rich people. Price the rich.
Maybe put a carbon tax on luxury foods and goods. So because they're gonna be like, I don't care. This is just rounding errors. So
that's fair. I could see if it's like a really expensive thing. Like $100, you add 50 cents. Who cares? Like a small increase. But I feel for the people who are scrimping to get $97 milk. Because if you don't give kids enough milk when they grow up, they get bowed legs. It's actually a big deal.
Right.
And it happens a lot in the past, which is why in America we have subsidized lunches where kids can get milk. Because if they didn't get milk, they would literally the calcium that they need for the bone structure wouldn't be there, and they would literally start having bowed limbs. And so whenever we have to go and fight the world's wars, especially you British people can't solve them on your own, we need our soldiers to not have bowed limbs. So that's feeding the populace well is just the military ensuring that they have a crop of soldiers to fight the next war. Like that's all it is. Like in World War I, World War II, when people were showing up and they were like so malnourished, they started introducing school lunches to feed kids. So like, oh, we probably should see this off at the pass. So I don't know where I'm going with that point anymore, but that's something we do. So like, if milk is more expensive, there you go. Sure. If milk is more expensive, it's not good. Like milk is already like on that point.
Yeah. Food prices are a bit not doing too well.
Yeah. But I see your point for expensive stuff. Like, luxury yachts. They can add a couple million more onto it and do some work with it. I could see that. So you're for the carbon tax if it's done in the right way. You don't see like a progressive carbon tax or a uniform carbon tax. You just see something for like the upper like 10% of costs.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Like a uniform carbon tax would really mess up a lot of people.
Yeah.
But something more sophisticated and only affecting people that can afford it, that'd be great. I mean, people price the total cost of going to net zero to something like, I'm at least in the right order of magnitude here, $3 trillion or something like that, which I think is kind of like the total GDP of Sweden or something like that. It's like 5% of world.
Sweden has $1 trillion GDP. I figured Sweden would be really small. I thought it would be like 500 billion or something. I think Ukraine is like 100 million. But the people talk about this all the time. So I know like Italy has the same GDP as Russia.
Let's take people talk Sweden about that a lot there, because I'm referring to like an old back of that envelope calculation. So who knows about the credibility of that? But I think it is on the trillions of dollar range that all the countries would need to spend as an aggregate every year to make
that's doable,
go away, which does feel doable.
China, America could do it by themselves. They take halvesies.
So we might get there.
I think China and America was like 20 trillion GDP a piece, right? Like America's like 21 and like China's like 17. So if like we split it in like half a trillion each, there you go. We can do that. Maybe
That seems fair.
yeah. We could stop it if we didn't have militaries. We could probably like do it tomorrow. But we need our militaries to, police the world and whatnot. It's a good thing. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, because that world was go right out of control without America and China about.
I mean, technically, it would. The American system of the American system of globalization is much better than the Britain system of globalization. Britain didn't allow globalization to happen. You guys stifled innovation.
Hey, that's the sins of our past.
Hey, well, when you were the world police, you only policed your world. We allow anyone to trade on our seas as long as they give us favorable deals. That's a good deal.
That is an
would have happened. Yes,
that's an improvement of the previous model.
Yeah, England's model was all roads lead to England, where America's model is trade as you will and pay us accordingly, and then we will intervene if you mess with that. That seems like the model.
That is the model.
I get a lot of people watching this in China, so this will be really interesting to the comment section. there's like a good like 10-12% of the people in China just like really like it because they're into innovation, and I don't know how they listen to it, but they must know English over there. But
they do.
They're gonna weigh in on this. I like to get some Chinese experts in on this. For people in China, would you be for this? But in a serious note. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, China's models, maybe we could say China has a new model, that's advanced. I don't know if it's advanced, if we can say it's advancing over the US model, but they tend to, okay, again, I don't know what your Chinese viewers are going to say, but tend to come into countries, build loads of infrastructure, set up economic deals. And I don't know if that's, a net good or whatever, but that's, they seem to be less intervening in the politics, more intervening in, hey, here's some, hospitals and schools and roads. Can we please mine your cobalt?
Please. They don't say please. Well, I think of their model as like a hybridization of America and the UK, because they go in and they do all those nice things. Like when America's using soft power, it usually works pretty well. When people see like American troops going places in a negative way, they don't like it. But when they see us like helping with humanitarian crises and building things, like people like us more. This is a surprise. But so China goes in and they build these things, but they don't build them for free. Like the Belt and Road Initiative, they own that land. Like a lot of the places, like if they default on it or whatever, they just like they seize it. It's like very like more of like England to America. It's like a little bit of both, where like America comes in with soft power, but it does have that English all roads lead to China route. But at the same time, like it's not, I don't want to say like America's like this paragon of virtue. I'm just saying like it's a little bit more like selfish English versus like American, we keep all the trade routes open, which is kind of nice.
Okay.
If we went away, you guys would be very sad. There would be so many pirates. You wouldn't be able to build your thing, for instance, if America went away.
Well, if that's true, then yeah, I'm all for it.
Yes, American imperialism. I don't think it's imperialism anymore. But so, what books would you recommend? It's just there's be like one person who's going to be a Chinese investor, like, oh, I really like this company. Listens in. We're just like carping China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's like, well, he's not giving my millions now. But that's not. We're just joking. Please invest in this stuff. But what are some books you recommend people check out? I'm always looking for new things to read.
Yeah. Okay. I tend to not read that much about specifically what I do. Actually, I tend to have quite different reading habits.
That makes sense.
I really liked The Case Against Reality. It's a book about the way our perceptions have evolved to not see reality is, but to see reality in a way that makes us more evolutionarily fit. And being evolutionarily fit doesn't map necessarily to truth or objective reality. And so it was a kind of a bit of a wow, I'm seeing everything different kind of book.
Your brain's really lazy. It's choosing based on past behavior what it's remembering and feeding to you.
Yes. Yeah. And I like it because it's a little bit heretic, right? A lot of people believe that we see reality as it is, and we see, that's what we're optimized and tuned for. that's what a lot of scientists believe, but they don't realize how much subjectivity and kind of approximations that are going on. So as a scientist, I was like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah. You might like Oliver Sacks then.
Oliver Sacks?
Yeah, he's a neuroscientist. I think he's a neurosurgeon or a neuroscientist or a neurologist, one of the neuros, a very big expert in the field. And he wrote books on case studies of brain or abnormalities that he experienced in life, like people who started seeing in gray, people who had some like corpus callosum type mess up, so then they couldn't see half the world out of one eye, but they could like write and stuff and whatnot. It's really interesting books. Yeah, I recommend that. But cool. I think you were going on for a second suggestion, but I just suggest that real quick to you.
Oh, second suggestion. I mean, the second suggestion that comes to mind is on the same topic, but from a Buddhist perspective, and it's called Seeing That Frees by Rob Gobaille. And so for anyone who's interested in like meditation or that type of stuff, then that takes a kind of a meditative lens to that case against reality kind of thing. It kind of is like, there's no perfect way of looking at anything, but the way you should look at it is the way that reduces suffering the most. And net suffering, not just your own suffering, right? Isn't it? The suffering of you and others around you. So I think those two books which chime quite well together. That's what's been going on from a non-fiction perspective. I'm currently listening to Dune and I'm loving it. It's such a crazy bit of sci-fi.
Is it the first time? Have you read them all? Okay, so this is the first. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Dude, what do you think of Paul Atreides?
Well, I've not got all the way to the end, so I don't know if that's going to shift how I view him.
Yeah, where is he right now in your head? Yeah.
Well, currently he's like, getting in with the Fremens, kind of figuring out what that kind of culture and he's only, he's in the process of morphing into someone new, right? I don't know who he's morphing into yet. So currently I'm intrigued and find him kind of cool, and but I'm not sure where his new powers will take him.
Yeah. Well, I look forward right in when you get to the end of his storyline, which doesn't resolve in this book. It resolves like, technically it doesn't ever resolve, but his kids are weird. But let us know what you think. And then what is the best way to stay up to date with what you're working on? Is it just like the website? Yeah, so I mean, we have a website. It's not very well updated. It's not, not all the latest information, but it's a good place to start. There's like, everyone listening is like, well, I'm not going to go to that.
No, like it's got a bunch of news articles that tells you what we've been up to. We're actually soon to get a marketing and branding lead who will like, take charge of, our comms and improve on that a lot. So go to our website. We sometimes post on LinkedIn and Twitter. That's the best I can say for now.
Have you ever read H.P. Lovecraft?
H.P. Lovecraft? No, what? No, tell me more.
It's like cosmic horror. This idea that there's like these old gods that if you were to like really know them, you'd be driven insane.
Oh,
well, anyways, so
so what's the connection?
So in the Antarctica, there are penguins that'll just like walk off into the middle of the Antarctica, and they don't know where they go. They just wander off. And so I've long felt that they go to appease the old gods to make sure the world doesn't cataclysm, like they're all like sleeping underneath the ice. And so I was asking you if you did know, what are the chances that underneath Antarctica, if all of it were to melt, are the old gods that the penguins are trying to keep sleepy? But I'm going to guess like 0% because you don't know the reference.
Oh, yeah. So the penguins come back?
No, they're like, but my hypothesis in this is that the penguins are wandering off into the to the Arctic and sacrificing themselves to the old gods to keep them sleeping. They're not coming back. Okay. The fiction from reality. The reality is penguins do wander off. Just for people listening in, penguins do wander off into the Arctic and they're never seen again. The fiction I'm saying is one of those old gods are feeding themselves to, and then if we melt the poles, will they waken up and kill us all? So it's like it is a esoteric reference. And I was just going to ask you probabilistically, how likely do you think that's to be true? But it doesn't sound likely.
Yes, I don't know, but why don't we put a camera on them and find out what they get up to?
They've tried. You can't. I don't know. I've had a penguin expert on. I've literally asked this question, and she said she does not know. We don't follow them.
No
Like,
one
we can't follow
knows.
them. They
We
just keep
can't follow
going.
them. They're just
They just keep
too
going.
sneaky. Well, this is, I think, one of my favorite mysteries that I've come across recently.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question, because I guarantee I'm gonna get a comment section where someone's gonna be like, "Why did you ask that stupid question?" It's like, I don't know. I just thought of it. We're talking about climate change. Like, that'd be a pretty big climate effect if there's like old gods living underneath the Arctic, being fed by penguins. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, and maybe, because climate change is getting worse, maybe they're not, sacrificing themselves in great enough numbers or something like that.
Or maybe it's a metaphor for capitalism and how we're destroying our own world. And there's like a few people like you that are sacrificing themselves to what could be a terrible future, but it's only a trickle and it's not enough to change it. And so they're going to wake up one day and it's going to cause a cataclysm. It's a metaphor.